Throughout her career, Andrea has grappled with a critical question. How can we, as women, realize our own internal power, both personally and professionally, no matter the constraints in the external world? Well, this is something I would imagine each of us have asked ourselves in various ways throughout our own lives. And tonight, we want you to know you are not alone. We hope this evening inspires you and encourages you to be mindful of your own self-worth, your own value, and recognize that you are the keeper of your worth and your value. Andrea is the director of the leadership program at DePaul University College of Education, where she has been an educator for the past 20 years. She has taught, written, spoken, and consulted worldwide on topics including empowered leadership and the area she has developed as internally referenced leadership. Her new book, Kicking Ass in a Corset, Jane Austen's 6 Principles for Living and Leading from the Inside Out, is one for anybody who wants to tap into their internal power. And there's no need to have knowledge or even be a fan of Jane Austen. But in case you're interested, Jane Austen is also a pretty kick-ass woman. Andrea received her Bachelor of Arts degree from Vassar College, her master's in education from Harvard Graduate School of Education, and her JD from the University of Pennsylvania. In addition to Andrea's earned degrees, she is a thought leader and a woman who supports women. Please join me in offering a warm Women of Willis welcome to Miss Andrea Kayne.
Oh, thank you so much, Elise, and thank you so much for having me here. What a wonderful group with the best acronym, WOW. And to create a support network where women come together to lift each other up is so inspiring. And indeed, it's one of the reasons why I wrote my book and why I love working with women's groups. So I'm going to share my screen and kind of dive right in to what I talk about in my book and in my work and in lecturing all over the place. It's entitled Kicking Ass in a Corset, Jane Austen's 6 Principles of Internally Referenced Leadership for Living and Leading from the Inside Out. And the reason I talk about a corset is because as women, there's so many ways in which we experience constraint in the workplace, in the world, in community, with family responsibilities. And while we were trying to dismantle those systems that constrain us out there, we also need to think about the way in which we have absorbed those systems in our minds and how we can realize a kind of freedom no matter what's going on around us. So corset is the metaphor for those pressures that we all feel from our families, from our communities, from our workplaces, from society writ large. I know a lot of us have wonderful places we work at and wonderful colleagues, but the research shows that sometimes for women in the workplace, while maybe our male counterparts have one backpack they're carrying, we have several more that we're carrying. And there could be, disproportionately, experiences of disrespect, pressure to be likable, absence of mentors and sponsors, lack of confidence, inadequate visibility, politics, other forms of gender discrimination, financial inequity, gendered career paths, limited access to networks, sexual harassment, disproportionate family responsibility, and I can go on and on and on. Indeed, let me go back. I recently published an op-ed in the Chicago Tribune about an experience I was having on some Zoom meetings. And again, it wasn't all Zoom meetings, but there'd be some Zoom meetings where I would find that I either wasn't being listened to, my ideas were being appropriated, other things were going on where I was feeling shut out and I had to work so hard to be heard. And I would end up muting myself when other people in the Zoom room weren't. And I would say, you know what? If you don't want to listen to me, kind of F you under my breath. And I would start like multitasking and tune out. And I thought about my book, which I'm going to kind of go through my sort of theory of internally referenced leadership. And I thought, what would Jane Austen do? There's actually a theory called muting theory about how women and others are marginalized in decision-making, in meetings, in boardrooms, in teams. And here I am muting myself. Would Jane Austen kind of retreat? Her heroines, and we're going to go through some of them, actually, even if the other people felt uncomfortable, they put themselves out there. So it was interesting because this ended up being, talked about in all sorts of spheres, and I realized that it could be small things. Then I had the funny experience where all of these mostly straight white men, some of whom I work with, contacted me about the op-ed, congratulating me on it. And I knew the subtext was, I'm sorry if I do this to you in meetings. And I had to say, it's not you, you're okay. And the ones who actually kind of do it to me, they, were not cognizant at all and didn't send any email. So my whole theory of internally referenced leadership is all about plugging into ourselves for our inner power instead of giving our power away and plugging into the outside world. And I'm going to talk about the different ways that I think we can do that, especially as women. And I think we've been conditioned to do that. But even I talk to a lot of women's empowerment groups. And one of the things I like to sort of say, to invite people to reframe, is we're not giving each other power. What we're doing is we're reminding each other that we've had the power the whole time. We just need to remember, and we need to help each other access that power. And so I think that's what this is all about. How can we plug into that inner power no matter what's going on around us? And yes, we need to change the outside world and make it more equitable and more inclusive and more just. But while we're fighting to do that, how can we still feel powerful and in control? And again, Jane Austen seemed like a really good archetype for me. I bring in the leadership literature, I bring in positive psychology. I'm a professor, I write leadership, I use positive psychology research in all my work. But Jane Austen, who was writing 200 years ago, who had these women who were in very misogynistic societies with very few choices, were able to kind of tap into an inner power that allowed them to sort of transcend their circumstances in different ways. And so I kind of use that as my jumping off point. And I kind of wanted to talk about the different ways. So one of the ways that we plug in to the outside world is we absorb other people's universal truths. And for those people who know Jane Austen or read Jane Austen, she begins the novel, it's a universal truth that a man with a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And she is making fun, she is mocking the idea that there are universal truths. She's also mocking the idea that other people's universal truths become our own. So my first principle is in honor of Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. And it's all about knowing and living your own internal value in the face of an external environment that can devalue you. So instead of getting our value from the outside world, how can we, in a self-actualized, proactive way, know our value? And I feel like Elizabeth Bennet has a couple clues and a couple strategies. And for those of you, again, the movies, I think, don't necessarily do Jane Austen justice. Jane Austen is not about women who marry well and say yes. It's actually about women who say no. In Jane Austen's time, a woman's worth was completely tied to marrying well. Elizabeth Bennet's proposed to, I think, 3 times during the course of the novel. Collins is kind of an idiot. She says no to him. But Mr. Darcy, who is tall, handsome, the richest guy in Regency England, he first proposes and he kind of puts her down. And he's arrogant, ruins her sister's relationship with Bingley, and she says no to him. And it's so shocking in that society that she says no to him and yes to herself. And she says it with this kind of confidence and self-assuredness. She kind of knows her value before, during, after, without tying it to the other people in her world. And it's really, really incredible. And a lot of the leadership literature talk about how the most effective leaders commit to being the source of their approval, control, and security, rather than outsourcing their approval, control, and security in other people, other circumstances, other conditions. So one of the exercises that I do with this, and I know we don't have a ton of time, but I'm going to ask you to think about this and put it in the chat. For this principle, I talk about the importance of not defining your value based on your work. If that work is bad, or even if that work is good. If you're in sales and your worthiness is based on your monthly gains, and you're the top salesperson in your company, what's going to happen? You're going to feel anxiety. What if I can't stay there? You're also going to feel a sense of alienation, from yourself and from a kind of inner groundedness and equilibrium. You're also going to try to fill something up, a void inside that can never be filled from this outside achievement. So what I have women I work with do is I have them write down 3 words that describe their strengths that have nothing to do with their work, nothing to do with their family, nothing to do with their service to other people at all. So I'd love it if you could think about 3 words or one attribute that describes who you are, having nothing to do with your work, with your service to other people? So let's put it in the chat. I'm going to do mine.
That's tough, Andrea.
It's really, really tough. We are so, and this is something that the literature shows for women in particular, we are relational. We're rewarded for being relational. We're rewarded for being the supporting actress in other people's movie. So how can we like star in our own movie? And how can we tap into a value that has nothing to do with our connection with other people? So I'm putting my 3 words in: creative, optimistic, and spiritual. Fun, creative, and energizing. Compassionate, confident, present. Adventurous, kind, curious. These are all excellent. Determined. Kind, focused, creative. Happy, easygoing, kind. Excellent. Curious, considerate, focused. This is awesome. So the idea: inquisitive, eloquent, quirky, bouncy, strong, determined, motivating. The idea is that we can go in to a situation and we can know our value going in. And even if the situation changes, we still have that value. That can be a home that we remember, that we ground ourselves in. Yeah, and I love this. Do you remember to be kind to yourself as well as others? So many of us don't like put our oxygen masks on first. And that's going to definitely come into another principle, but that's excellent. Yes, we all need to work on that. So now we get into the second way we plug in externally, and it is accepting the role of victim. And I know so many of us are really resilient and problem solving. So when I say accepting the role of victim, I don't mean that we put the role on ourselves. I mean, other people do it to us. Oh, poor you. Oh, you're never going to recover. Oh, you can only go so far. And so this is Eleanor Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility. It's about responding to external tumult and adverse change with an internal calm, acceptance, and problem-solving resilience. And women are really good at this. And it's been extra hard during COVID. And I think resilience has different components to it. It was really exciting for me when I was using my Harvard Business Review emotional intelligence set, looking at the definition of resilience and people who possess these 3 defining characteristics. They coolly accept harsh realities, they find meaning in terrible times, and they have an uncanny ability to improvise. They're agile, making do with whatever is at hand. And this is Eleanor, who whose father died. She and her sisters and her mother. Did I freeze? Did I just freeze? She and her sisters and her mother have to move out of their house and are basically rendered penniless. And she is the one who's able to go from A to B to C and have this really strong resilience. And the description of her when she first appears in the novel, Eleanor, this eldest daughter whose advice was so effectual, possessed a strength of understanding, coolness of judgment, which qualified her, though only 19, to be the counselor of her mother and enabled her frequently to counteract, to the advantage of them all, that eagerness of mind in Mrs. Dashwood, which generally have led to imprudence. So she's able to be calm. She's able to be mistress of herself. It doesn't mean she doesn't feel her feelings, but her feelings aren't like driving the car. I don't know if any of you have read Elizabeth Gilbert, but she has this wonderful analogy about fear. She talks about how her fear is part of her. She expresses her fear. She listens to her fear. But when she's driving her car, her fear is in the child seat in the back. It's not at the steering wheel. So she's able to kind of move on. And that is kind of Eleanor Dashwood. And when other people put her in that role of victim, things are so terrible, things are so hard, she kind of accepts where she is and she looks for the opportunity. She looks for the problem-solving reframe. So there are a bunch of exercises I do around this. One is kind of radically accepting where we are instead of spinning round and round, fighting the narrative. Another, number 3, is being able to be in the situation, but not of the situation. Being able to go to a place of distance, it's called going to the balcony, so that you can view and see all the possibilities and kind of be almost living your life, but also in that witness mode, so you can reframe and look for solutions. The other thing that is very Eleanor is creating a calming mantra for yourself when you get triggered, when a crisis happens, when you don't know what to do, when there have been 10 million Zooms, the technology is not working, your boss is on the phone, and you just want to pull your hair out. So again, Eleanor's, I will be calm, I will be mistress of myself. You know, mine is, and I'm going to have us all put it in the chat. Take a deep breath. Count to 10 and reset. So I'm a big meditation person. So I do this, I say this all the time. And I even have it, oh, I think I just did it, everyone in the meeting. Mine is take a deep breath, count to 10 and reset. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to put a calming mantra in the chat. This too will pass, life will go on. I love that. Any other ones? One day at a time. It is what it is. Those are all really good ones. And it's good to kind of have that handy. You are safe. The future's uncertain. You are loved. You have value. Huge And that's where the first principle also kind of comes in, that our value's not contingent on any circumstance around us. Step back for a moment, move forward, do the best you can do with whatever you have at the moment. Those are hugely calming. Excellent. So now we get to the third way we externally give our power away. We wait for others to recognize our hard work. And this is one we're all guilty of. It's kind of like if the tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it make a sound? We wait for others to kind of see our merit, to see how hard we're working. And we don't kind of claim it. We don't claim it to other people, but sometimes we don't even claim it for ourselves. And I think as women, we've been conditioned that, you know, if we talk about what a great job we're doing, if we talk about how kick-ass we are, we're bragging, we're boasting, we're being selfish, we're taking the limelight. When I went to law school, Lonnie Guinier and Michelle Fine wrote a book called On Becoming Gentlemen. At that time, Lonnie Guinier was a law professor at Penn. And she talked about the difference between the way male law students and female law students would participate in class. Women, and I still do this all the time, I want to have a jar. You know, people have a swear jar. I want to have an apology jar. This may be stupid, but this is probably wrong, but I'm sorry if, you know, like putting ourselves down before we contribute. There's so many times when I've done, and I've seen this with clients, I've seen this in workshops, where the woman on the team, and sometimes it's only one, does the lion's share of the work, and everybody else gets the credit. And then there's this idea, well, obviously the work speaks for itself. So it's really important that we claim our hard work and merit, and whether they see it or not, that tree made a sound. We need to see it. And it needs to count for us. And so the third principle is like Anne Elliot from Persuasion: choose lasting internal worthiness, hard work, and merit over institutions and structures that are privileged, based on privilege and entitlement. There's a great book called Through the Labyrinth, How Women Become Leaders. And these women talk about, and this is Harvard Business Review Press, they talk about, you know, the importance of merit and rubrics, you know, set ahead of time. They talk about how when there is criteria that is proactive and fair, women kick ass. It's just having that, and it's also having the advocacy, and also changing the norm so that when women do advocate, it's seen as, of course. But I think it's also about seeing that hard work and merit and having it count ourselves. And there are several practices around this, but one practice is what's called a brag. And even the word brag has kind of icky connotations, and I think I use it on purpose. But what I'd love you to do, and again, we're kind of going through, we're doing a little bit of speed dating here, so I apologize for going so fast, but think about a brag in your work recently that you are going to put in the chat. So I will start, and I'd love everyone to put a brag in the chat. So I put mine in. And one of the things I noticed is that and I think this is about, for me, I feel like I love my family, but I feel like I was conditioned to kind of damp it down a little bit and not be as big as I could be or wanted to be. And I'm 55. I've seen that with a lot of my friends in my generation. And so the idea of bragging almost feels like it's too much. So it's a practice that I do. So I'd love everyone to put a brag in the chat. This is like important. It's a little uncomfortable. See, we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait here. I have a gig at 7 o'clock, but we're gonna wait, keep everybody here till you brag in the chat, please. Oh, ran the Chicago Marathon. That's so cool. Planned a large work event with executives, industry leaders, felt amazing. Wow, that's awesome. A large project, become a relationship you foster. That's excellent. More brags. I hiked to the peak of Angel's Landing. Wow, in Zion. Gorgeous. Any more brags? I'm working, running, busy with 3 kids and a gazillion animals. Hallelujah. That's awesome. So one of the challenges, opportunities, is to do a brag every day before you go to sleep. That you saw yourself, however big, however small. I organized an event to support our company's annual fundraiser. Excellent. It's just important that we see our work from the inside out, and we aren't waiting for the environment to see it. Oh, yes, please do it, Lauren. Let me know how it goes. So now we get into the 4th way that we give our power away. We're afraid to speak our truth. And one of the things my editor said to me, we were sort of talking about this one, and we were talking about how it's very easy for Fanny Price in Mansfield Park, who's this fictional character, to kind of stand up, because she's a fictional character, and there aren't the real repercussions that happen when you have a job and you have health insurance and you have college tuitions. And so what I talk about with this principle is, how can we faithfully follow our internal moral compass in the face of external pressure and coercion in our work, in our communities, in different spheres? How can we, not be bystanders when we see other people being treated badly? Like, how can we really speak our truth and help create organizations where that's not the norm, or challenge organizations, or at least find ways that we can again, feel like there is what, management guru Peter Drucker said. He talked about, like, the most important question for a leader is, what are my values? And ideally, we want to be in companies and organizations where our values are aligned with the company's values. And that may not always be a perfect fit, but in order to have that happen, we need to know kind of who we are and what our values are going in. So we aren't just this vacuum for whatever's going on at the organization. So in this principle, I talk about the importance of, and Peter Drucker has this thing called the mirror test, which is kind of looking in the mirror and feeling like, am I the kind of person that I want to be? And he talks about, and I sort of love this, in the book, I talk about how all these principles, it's not like honoring them all the time. It's a practice. So we fail and fail again and learn and try and adjust. And it's almost like just having a North Star. So one of the things that I don't know that we have time to do it tonight, but is to think about a time when maybe we wanted to say something that just didn't seem right, that we saw or we experienced and we didn't. And we felt that, like, I feel it in my stomach, a kind of tightness. And one practice that's really helpful is to write what I call a better guide script, where I go back to that scene. I call it like internally referenced soul fiction, because I'm like, I acted out of egoic fear before, and like, how would I respond differently? And I also take into account the fact that, I can't be Norma Ray in every situation and stand up on the chair and just say, take this job and shove it. I have family responsibilities and obligations, so I have to kind of act with certain constraints. But God knows right now there are a lot of jobs out there. People are leaving. It's the great resignation, and people can choose companies where the values align, or people can talk to their supervisors about, maybe things in the culture that need to change. So again, it's sort of a hard principle, but it's not an absolute one, but it's one to reflect on and one to be cognizant of, and having that script so that the next time a situation that's similar arises, there's some language and some tools that we've developed. The fifth way we plug in externally and give our power away is we put our rest and renewal and play last. There's so much research that shows that women particularly, and especially working mothers, when it comes to our rest and renewal, we often do it when the gas tank is empty and the car needs to be put in the shop. We aren't doing it on a regular basis. Our rest and renewal, if there's a to-do list, we're last on the list. What's interesting about that is research shows that when there are sacred practices for rest that are built into the day, or at least built into the week, we're way more productive. We get some of our best ideas and thinking when we can get off the email, off the phone calls, off the meetings for a while, and just be creative and let the ideas flow. But it's so hard to find time to do that. So the fifth principle, like Catherine Morland of Northanger Abbey, protect and harness your internal childlike dreaming, wonder, curiosity, and hope in an external world that can be discouraging, disillusioning, and full of despair. So Lydia, your son, who has the best birth date ever, 4321, I'll never forget that. You know, what could we all learn from him? It's a him, right? Son. He is in the moment. Whether it's a toy or a tickle or a bath, he is like fully present. If you look at the literature on design thinking, and the reason why at tech companies, and maybe there's some tech companies in your beautiful building, you see toys and games, you know, it's about that creativity, that flow, being present. You know, I talk all about using play to deal with really big problems and how it's so incredible. The other thing for me, this principle is about whether it's taking a bath or meditating or writing in a journal or watching a trashy show on Netflix or playing with your dog or taking a walk, whatever it is. And it could just be like 15 minutes a day, a half hour a day, an hour would be great. You know, morning, night would be ideal. If you can build that in to your daily practice, you will be so much more refreshed. For me, there are a couple things I've started to do, you know, differently. And let me get to, and we're going to sort of talk about sacred rest in the chat. But a couple of the things that I do very differently since I started kind of working with this is in my bedroom, I do not check my emails. I used to check my emails first thing when I woke up and last thing before I go to bed. No emails in the bedroom. The other thing that I don't do anymore is I don't watch the news like before I go to bed. And I was a huge Morning Joe person. I don't watch the news in the morning. I do bath and meditation religiously at night. It's like this sacred thing that I will not do. Now, I don't have little kids like I used to, and I'm an academic, so I'm not like working for a big property management company where people are having crises all day long. But if there's a way to have some sacred space, again, just 15 minutes in whatever the meditation of your choice is, whether it's meditation, whether it's just going in the backyard with a beer at the end of the day or a glass of wine, whatever it is, some time that's just for you, that's just quiet, that's just in the now. There's no yesterday, there's no tomorrow, you're just experiencing the now. For any of you who have a dog, your dog is that present moment, beginner's mind energy. That's the energy. So what I'd love you to do, it doesn't have to be something that you're necessarily doing now, but can you put in the chat a commitment to spend 15 minutes a day for yourself? And it's not like, you know, for rest and renewal. Like, how will you spend those 15 minutes? You know, we're not following you home. We're not going to check. But part of being together in this empowerment space is to kind of hold each other accountable for being there for ourselves. Evening guided meditation, that's excellent. And there's some wonderful ones, whether it's Calm or Headspace. Oh, crocheting, excellent. Morning meditation, excellent. Reading, wonderful. Oh, the dance session, that's excellent. Play with the puppy. Animals are a great way. Walking, I love that. Dance session. Walking your dog is awesome. Taking a walk, no matter what it's like. There's nothing like that. So that is so important. It's important for us. Again, you know, it makes us productive, gives us great ideas, but it's just important for our own well-being to kind of really connect and unwind. And again, I talk about finding that space at work and home. And again, when work is difficult, like bringing your inner child to work, that kind of childlike energy, that wonder, that creativity, that passion, that, you know, experimenting, that's what that principle's about. The last way, I think we give our power away. And I feel like this is something, and I've had a lot of people read the book and say, gosh, I wish I had read this 20 years ago. And this is one of those principles that I really wish I had known, even though I've been reading Jane Austen my whole life, and I'm a Janeite and a Jane Austen nut, and I reread her work every year. This principle came together for me recently when I was putting the theory together. But this idea that we never get it done. I feel like at 55, I have spent 30 plus years thinking, when I get it together, when I'm on it, when I've done it, when I'm there, there's this idealized Andrea who knows it all, who's on top of it all, who gets it done. And the truth is, and for those of you who know Carol Dweck's wonderful work around growth mindset, we never get it done. We're always evolving. We're always learning. We're always making mistakes. We're always course correcting. We don't need to be this like perfect Stepford version of ourselves. We're a work in progress, and there's so much relief in that. And whether it's at home or at work or in our communities or with our friends, people aren't liking us or loving us because of this idea of the fact that we're doing all this stuff so well. I mean, they love us for who we are. And we are imperfect, learning beings. We're always works in progress. And there is great relief in that. And I find there's so many women's groups that I facilitate, that I work with, women's groups that I'm a member of and I'm a part of, and we lift each other up. And partly what we do is we just provide enormous relief that we don't have to be this idealized image. We take the pressure off each other because there's so much pressure that we can put on each other. And again, I think that that is so, so important to remind each other that we don't need to get it all done. We don't need to get it all right. And we are going to make mistakes at work. We're going to make mistakes as parents. We're going to make mistakes in our relationships and with our friends. And that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes and everybody is growing. And so one of the things I do that's been super powerful for me is I just write down, you know, I used to write a journal And I used to, when I look at some of my old journals, I'm so damn hard on myself. I have that inner critic. And this principle is about softening that inner critic and talking about, instead of talking about what I got wrong, I'm a learning being. So what did I learn in the realm of work, love, and knowledge today? It's like my Emma growth journal, and it could be anything. And this is from the book. And this was the night before I wrote this passage, that my editing process is more effective when I read aloud. I had a close friend's father in hospice, and I feel like I was a little delinquent with her. And knowledge that, I had in the book, internally referenced leaders do this. And I sort of softened that throughout the whole book, that it's a constant practice of return. We're not there all the time, but we try. And there's just kind of huge, I think, compassion and relief in that. So again, this is like the summary of how each of the heroines as archetypes kick ass. Elizabeth kicks ass. She doesn't care what people think. Eleanor kicks ass. She stays cool under pressure. Anne kicks ass. She doesn't ask anyone to do it for her. She does her own hard work. Fanny kicks ass. She does the right thing, even if it's hard. Catherine kicks ass because she really smells the flowers. Emma kicks ass by admitting she's not as kick-ass as she thought she was. So this is all my stuff. I hope you stay in touch.